it away, Brian.
Thanks, Tom. Like Tom said, I'm Brian Chappell, co-founder at Links.io. We are a small development team focused on web and mobile apps. We only use web technologies, so we don't do a lot of like the native stuff like you guys were talking about before. So we're forced to use a little bit different technology. Regardless, we kind of come to the same conclusions about material design and some of the other stuff you talked about. So our focus is startups. That's essentially like our main clientele. Has been for a while now. I would start with talking about why we spend so much time on prototyping. So with a startup, usually they have like a high industry knowledge and a real passion for solving a problem, but maybe they don't have a good grasp on what that solution looks like, what the form factor is, how it's going to be delivered. So there's a lot of debate within a startup. To a large extent, I like to think of them as like little microcosms, little early civilizations. So they have infighting, they have civil wars, they have their own art, their own language, their own slang terms, the whole deal. Prototype does the same thing as any image does in visual thinking, is it kind of cuts through all of that chatter where it brings us on the same wavelength. So if me and you were talking about a button and what a button did and had a bunch of user stories and documentation, it may be difficult for us to figure out if we're talking about the same thing. Maybe you're talking about Flickr and I'm talking about Facebook, but we're both talking about sharing photos. So prototype cuts through all that, and the big thing with somebody who has a lot of industry knowledge is they're using a lot of terms that we may not be familiar with, and vice versa, if they don't have any technical background. The process starts off the same with every prototype that we work on. It's like a napkin sketch or the cucumber method, if you've heard of that. As a admin, I want to create a user so that they can use the system. We deal with a lot of roughly drawn mockups. If we're lucky, we're able to bring a designer onto the team, and they will iterate and build a wireframe. And then that wireframe has a bunch of tentacles that can be a little bit difficult to decipher. But then that wireframe gets refined for a while and iterated upon. And then from there, we get these like really high fidelity mockups that look really great and look really cool, but there's no functionality, right? So it's just like that cave drawing. It's just a static image. I'm not positive on what maybe the designer's intent is or the client as a startup's intent is, because it's just a flat image. So the natural progression is, or has been, to create mockups. So there's a lot of tools out there. Proto.io, talking about earlier today. Balsamic is a really, really popular one. I think that all of these tools have a general fatal flaw. So they're forcing people who are developers and people who are designers to operate in the same box. Like with Proto.io, there's a really steep learning curve. So you have to spend quite a bit of time with it to get something that looks great, but as Jenna said earlier, when you get it produced, it looks amazing, and it's really, really high quality. But it's hard to get it there. So they force people who are designers to jump into these applications, learn these rather complex systems, and then they force people who are UX engineers or more technical to do the same thing. The other flaw that most of them have is a lack of collaboration. So it's difficult unless we did the same thing like we do with the PSDs, and we just put them in a Google Drive folder and we talk about the Google Drive folder. There's not a lot of collaboration baked in comparison to the tools that I use and my team uses and that I want to talk about. So Sketch and InVision, I know it's a recurring theme, but they just kind of set themselves apart in that Sketch just does design really, really, really well. So if you look at their site and look through all their stuff, almost everything that they have to talk about or showcase is all app development, all website development. And then InVision is a mock-up tool that allows you to take exports and create hotspots. So we'll go through that. Let me jump into Sketch. So this is Sketch. I know that we had a screenshot of it earlier, but just to go a little bit deeper, each one of these is an artboard here on this left side menu. So these act as individual screens. One cool thing about Sketch is it has a pretty big community around it, and there's a lot of resources at your disposal. But right out of the box, just going back to the material design conversation, we could jump into a template, pull out material design, and get started immediately. So we can cut all these screens up and get high-fidelity mockups straight from there. There's a few sites online, one called Sketch App Resources that just goes on and on and on and on with examples and tutorials and things that are free. A lot of Google material stuff, again, that you can cut up and that you can use. With each screen, you think of your prototype like a movie. So just a series of frames in a screen. So it's a little bit of a break from maybe how a developer thinks of model view controller. Each screen in a movie has to be separate, has to be created individually. Same thing with this premise. There's some other elements to consider, the way that you can export. So every screen is its own entity. We can grab one, export it as a PNG, save it to our desktop, and then back to the flat PSDs. It's a file that now we can manipulate in the mockup tool. But if there's ever a client request at this phase, it's really simple just to jump back into your Sketch tool, go to that individual element. Let's say they wanted to change a button color, and just with a few clicks, you can change it. So it would be a semi-painful experience to go through and change all the buttons over to red. So we're able to cut through that process by using symbols. Let me find a better. So with this header, each one of the screens shares the same header. If we step down into the background and the client just said, hey, we changed our brand identity and we want to switch all of our screens over to red, it's the same flow. So it changes them all at the same time. So just a time-saving piece there. You have the same thing in Illustrator and Photoshop. I have a little bit less familiarity there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of these concepts are universal for design tools. The next piece, once you're able to cut out each of your screens and have your PNGs or PDFs or however you want to generate them, would be to drop them into your mockup. So this is InVision, and you create individual projects or prototypes. Go to new, we'll create one real quick, get fitter, and then you just simply select the device type. grab iPhone, good project. We'll grab 3 screens, drop them in. So now you go into each screen and you create hotspots or actions. So think of it in the same way that Keynote operates in its animations. Go into view a screen. We have a few tools. Build mode would be the one just to get rolling. Link it to another screen. It's pretty straightforward here. Let's go to feed. And then maybe we'll also link the sign up. So pretty rapidly, we have a semi-functioning application that'll route you through a few screens. You can start to get more and more creative with not only how the screens are routed, but also side menus, fixed headers, so that you have scroll animations. There's quite a few different scenarios that you can try out. If we go back to projects, I have this this sketch document, all the screens cut out of it, and I have them dropped into this prototype that I created earlier. So I went ahead and I linked everything. This is a splash screen, so this is all fake, right? There's no coding involved. It's just drawing pictures. So we can click through and log in. Use the menu. And so we have a hover state there. So that's another example of something that's out of just a traditional route from PDF to PDF. Tabbing back and forth. All of this stuff is shared by, or a lot of this stuff is shared by those mock-up tools that I was showing you earlier. The real place that we start to get differentiation in this tool set being better than all the other ones is in, well, first off, in the integrations. So there's a Sketch integration with InVision. So if I go into, let me go this way actually. So if I go into the assets folder and go into the source files, there's the sketch file that I was working on earlier. So now when I make a change to my sketch file, I don't have to export it, resize it, drop it into my InVision, and then update all of the routing, all of the hotspots with this new screen. I can simply, it's not going to update quickly enough, but I'm using Google Drive as the repo to synchronize from. But if we came through here, we can do the same thing as before. And as soon as we save it out, my Google Drive starts synchronizing. Shouldn't work yet. But within the next few minutes, it'll then automatically update the entire InVision file with whatever revisions that theoretically the designer would have made in the sketch file. The other big differentiation here is the collaboration. So if we go into comment mode, you're able to share this as a link with anybody, and they're able to actually install that on their phone. So I have an example here. So you simply just send them a URL, and then they're prompted to save that straight to their home screen, and then they just have another app on their home screen that they can click into, and then it seems real. Again, this is all just the mock-up. So you can sign in, we have a fixed header. So we have this scroll animation. You can bounce around, the same as the InVision on, or the mock-up on the web view. It's just a little bit more intuitive, I think, when if it's a mobile app and they're able to use it right on the device, and they're able to really drill down and think hard about what sort of content that they want to show to the user. And much like Stream, start to really think hard on what pieces they can get rid of. So back to that early civilization analogy of a startup, it's all everything every day is made up. So it's just more determining on making a decision on what are the good things that we made up and what are the bad things we made up. This commenting tool drives our entire design flow. So you come in, I've shared it with the client. Now they're able to pick the tool, say, hey, this needs to be red, and then it becomes a to-do. And I'll show you here. Anybody familiar with Trello? The whole Kanban board? So if we come in here, we're working through each of these screens, and it'll tell you how many comments are outstanding per screen. As you make it through the comments, the idea would be to move it into different lists. But the comments are listed out. So I would go through here and figure out where the gaps are in the functionality, what needs to be changed. With this one, it's simply a matter of routing. So that can just be done right in InVision, and we don't have to go back to Sketch. We don't have to include the designer back in the conversation. We don't have to go through that whole process. So just following, again, so I have two tabs that are working. My nav bar is working, or my hamburger menu is working. But this general is not linked to anything. So the client must have been clicking around, realized that there's an entire page that isn't functional. Notice here, though, that there are 3 tabs. So there are 3 different screens, right? There's no model view controllers, nothing like that. So if we went through each screen, we'd have to do this over and over. We'd have to do it 9 times. So instead, we just create a hotspot. And I believe settings tabs. So we'll save that hotspot. And now when we click around each screen with that hotspot, should function in the same way. All those tabs should lead to the screens respectively. The only issue here is that we have the general screen that we just brought in. It's not included in the hotspot. So there you see that the sketch file updated and synchronized, and we didn't actually bring over any new files. So we just need to add the settings tab on here. So now, back in view mode, we can just go through each one. They all work. The flow would be, we go back to that comment. So it connects to the settings screen or the general screen. Oh, there we go. So for some reason it dropped it down to the bottom, but we would just mark that as resolved. And now that's done. So that seems like a really, really simple piece of functionality, but usually design reviews are in-person meetings or phone calls, and clients are just peppering you with changes you need to make. And I can write pretty fast, I think, but I always miss a ton of things. It's just the meeting after that meeting is always, what about X? Or why didn't you do that yet? Well, because we didn't write it down. We don't even know what you're talking about, but it's on the list now, right? We don't necessarily say that, but so this adds accountability into the process. So the other side of the coin is that they say something that they don't want to remember. So they might request a button be put into the homepage. It's a terrible idea. You tell them 20 times that it's a terrible idea. Here's another possibility, so on and so on. It gets put into the app, and then the following conversation is, why did you put that in the app? That's a terrible idea. We had this discussion. I didn't say to put it in the app. So that whole lack of accountability completely goes out of the window, because then I can say, no, on the 31st, you said you wanted that button. We went back and forth about it. You still decided you wanted it, and so we put it into the app. One other thing that I want to show you guys on the linking screens is the premise of overlays. So if we go into this screen here, I have a comment to kind of help keep me on track. So I wanted to link in an overlay. So it's just a screen from Sketch that doesn't have a background. So it has it has transparency. We can grab overlay, pick the change activity. Close it out. So I like to just jump around for a second just to make sure. So now we have this cool little animation. We have to connect that screen as well, though, for it to get us back to where we were. Just grab this. And we're just going to, on this, we don't have to route it anywhere. We can just say whatever the last screen was, go there. Oh, it's not going to go there. So now you get that menu overlay, and it's a cool idea, and there's been conversations that I've had with clients where they thought functionality was already coded and complete, but they were just thinking about the mock-up. So it can really, pass the test in terms of getting the point across for the user experience. The other piece here is history. So we can look back and see, maybe that discussion with clients is, no, I told you I wanted it read. The comment still wasn't in there. Or maybe you misunderstood, and maybe you said that it should be read, and you can jump back in time and see where you kind of deviated from the plan, or where you could have took a better route. So we come back into here. Shows you guys the Kanban board. The other piece is the activity. So there's a track record of everything that happens within the app. So sometimes we show stuff to folks, and they say that they looked at it, and they say that it looks great, keep going forward, and you get the sensation or the thought that maybe they're not really spending any time thinking about what you built, and they never maybe looked at it. So you can just come in here and just see how many times they viewed it. So here's a good, Jeremy jumped in here for 12 seconds, clicked through 3 screens. We got what screens, duration of time he was in here, and then if he left any comments. And usually you can see, 35 minutes, 52 screens, he's probably got a lot to talk about next meeting after this. you can also watch as we drop in new screens and we make iterations. Now, I've been saying we a lot, and I think maybe you look at these tools and you think that this is for just a product owner and a designer. But I think we've probably all seen it before, where those two groups of people can kind of lead you down a rabbit hole when you don't have an engineer to say, hey, that's not really possible, right? You're talking about something that cost $1 million, not $100. Why are you even considering that? But to a designer, it's a really cool looking idea, and it's something that we should try. So with this whole flow, you're able to loop in all of these different stakeholders: clients, designers, UX engineers, and because we're so small, we don't really have our development team is so small, we don't have the margin to really rebuild stuff over and over and over. So we mock up every single thing and ask the client to spend as much time as they can with the app, and also show it to their prospective customers. Because if they don't change it, usually their first 5 customers, who oftentimes may have their last name because their family members will give a bunch of input that they choose to make changes. So we ask them to do that, and then it also, from the developer's perspective, gets all the guesswork out of the way. So if we can have a high-fidelity interactive mock-up, we can start to kind of change that loop of, hey, I thought you meant an admin panel. Hey, I thought you meant this. Hey, I thought you meant that. You could just go by the blueprints, or in this case, it'd be more like maybe architectural drafts. Now, going a step further, those meetings that are phone calls or those meetings that are in person, or the remote meetings, sorry. There's functionality here for live share. So I have the tutorial pulled, and it's like an online collaboration tool, screen sharing, Skype, any of those kind of deals, but they have it baked into their application. It'll probably take a while. Oh, there we go. So same tools as before, but a little bit other stuff like a drawing tool, a place to make notes. You also have the online call, but then I can take and I can share this with folks in maybe like a Slack channel or anything like that, so they can jump on if they need to, or they can just watch from a high level. There are some beta products that they're putting out where the idea of those first early adopters having a chance to use the mockups, you can watch them and track their interactions. So that's a different beta product they have where they're going to be supposedly giving you the ability to create style sheets and things like that from InVision. But this other beta product that they're working on is called Handoffs. Well, no, this is called Handoffs. The other beta product that they have is more like a Big Brother overview, and watch that user actually engage with the product for the first time. Because usually there's a lot of feedback, a lot of changes that happen after that first discussion. So lastly, there is a big integration that is really helpful for us. So on our team, what we do is we have a Slack channel for each client, and then we actually invite that client into the Slack channel. So the only thing that's dangerous is you make sure you want to be talking like you have the level of professionalism in the Slack channel with the client in there, but the thing that they really like about it is they have like a direct line to you, right? So they can jump on there, reach out to you, and have a discussion. Or you can do a configuration with an integration with InVision just like you can with Sketch. And then every time that a comment is made on one of those design prototypes or in the InVision mockup, it's a comment that comes into that Slack channel. And so not only do you can get notified from a bunch of different ways, but since everybody's already here and everybody's connecting this channel with this project, it makes it really, really easy to keep track of what needs to be done. The fact that they have had an integration for a while now, and this is a new feature, the third and last beta thing that they have coming out that I wanted to bring up was the ability to drop a InVision mockup into Slack and then have it be clickable is their end goal. So we'll see if that's a possibility, and it is something that they're working directly with Slack on, because I think Slack is working on building a marketplace. I also, if anybody's on the Charleston Tech Slack, I dropped the mockup in there, so if you're on your phone and you click that link, the channel is called InVision Sketch. It'll take you to that link and then give you the whole prompt that I was showing you on my phone to download it straight to your device. So just overall, the whole idea here is not to be a pain, but it's to the client, because I know that they can sometimes be like, let's move faster, move faster, move faster. We've been in the design process for a long time, but it's really, really, really expensive to build something, and I think it's painful for developers to build something and then have to change it before you ever even get a user. And that's a really, really annoying thing that seems to happen a lot. And the whole goal behind the prototype is to just get rid of, or reduce that as much as possible, and know exactly what you're building and not have to work from maybe convoluted user stories or documentation or specs that aren't real clear. It's hard to get much more clear than this, you know. It's hard to beat this. I don't know how many levels of conversation you would have to really capture what the client wants. But a quick click through on a prototype with InVision and with Sketch, and for the most part, everybody should be able to grasp what's going on and what they need to build as a developer. So that's it. Cool.
Take a few questions since we got a little bit of that.
For sure.
Any questions for Brian?
What do you like about Slack versus like a Trello or a Basecamp?
So we also have a bunch of other integrations. So we do the GitHub integration, and then we have an integration with Zapier where we can create GitHub issues. We have a few other. We're already there in Slack, so that's probably the only, there's no reason to deviate from it. We did have Trello for a while, and then we started using something called ZenHub. And so ZenHub gives you that Kanban board on top of GitHub. So you create an issue and just pass it through each of the lists. And so that was the only reason we were using it, to track development tasks.
Good question for you.
Yeah.
For what's your development handoff like when you're done with the prototype? It's client approved. What's it look like when you're done with the prototype work and development starts? How do you bridge that gap? Do you have like any secret sauce that's worked well?
So we do, and I may not be answering your question right, but so we do a couple of kickoff meetings, internal and then with the client, and then we have a general template sprint for Greenfield sprint or Scrum that we break out all of the tasks that we can. Typically, we can only do 3 sprints back to back. Anything over that is probably fruitless. to guess on. And then it's a lot of, usually, so maybe it's important to distinguish or note this, the mock-up doesn't necessarily end, the process of mocking up doesn't end when the development starts. For us, that's a process that goes to the end of the sprint cycle, all the way to the end of production. So that's handed off to the client, and they can take it with them and do whatever they want to. But we want to just keep the prototype at in the same place that the product is, because that does happen a lot. There's minor deviations from the product, and so when we go 3 or 4 or 5 layers deep, and then we want to say, hey, just go in and we have a new developer come on. And say, just jump into the README and the mock-ups in there and all the documentation's in there. Just let me know what the gaps are. If the mock-up is like a light year away from where the product is, it's not of value. So that we just try to keep them together.
Jeff?
Do you have clients, I imagine, come to you with their own versions of prototypes and mock-ups in other systems?
Yep.
And do you adapt to that, or do you kind of say, this is the process that we know works and we need to kind of migrate to our mock-up process? Or do you actually take, depending on the quality of those, do you adapt and move with those into your development process?
So we take what they have. Usually the only we have yet to have a client that has a whole flow at this level of like a full prototyping capacity. But usually if there is a different formula, it's usually in that they're using Photoshop. So it's just a matter of taking those Photoshop files, cutting them up in PDFs, and going through the same process.
Yeah.
We'll usually replicate that in Sketch because that's a lot easier for us to build from versus something like Photoshop. So yes and no. Right, so we evolved their design.
2 questions. One was we use Sketch, but one thing we couldn't really figure out is when there's multiple designers working on something, how to kind of go back into the file and see what were the changes that they made. Is there a way to highlight the adjustments they made versus kind of trying to find?
So for that scenario, I probably wouldn't do the Google Drive sync. So you probably want to make it where they're forced to drop in a new file every single time.
Okay.
Couple pieces. If you have a bunch of changes going to the same Google Drive repo, you're probably going to have corruption. So I have a few Sketch files that are fully baked, and it's like an older version that they had to give me so that I could work backwards from. But with multiple designers, I think it makes more sense to have each designer manually dropping in their screen, so then it's documented in that activity feed.
Second question
Yep.
was, once you get through the prototyping that you showed, do you, before development, have you ever done some usability testing on the
Yep.
prototype itself?
Yep. So 2 weeks ago, we just had a startup that we're working with, and they only have a mock-up, and they were able to raise a bunch of money just with the mock-up. So even beyond usability testing, but like actually going out and raising a VC round, that same company is using the mock-up and taking it out to their prospective clients and testing. And there's one person, so I think it's important to distinguish too. Sometimes it can get a little bit cluttered with everybody's opinions. There's one person that distills all of that user feedback, and they're responsible for putting that onto the comment feed for that project.
I noticed that InVision said you could drag and drop PSDs in there.
Mm-hmm.
Will that automatically break out the layers or groups of layers in order to separate frames? And does InVision also export out to separate file formats? So Sketch or even PSD itself?
So InVision doesn't have the whole export. You can export the whole project, but it's going to be in the whatever the raw files are.
Right.
Photoshop or the PSDs are going to be the same flow. It's just just a different tool. Once it goes into InVision, it doesn't cut it up. You have to cut it up before it goes into InVision.
So each view.
Yeah. So if we just take that that overlay as an example, this is it.
It's not.
Lost you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So this is that overlay menu, and to export it, I just said exclude the background in the export. So that was the only slice I had to make. But if you have to go deeper and deeper, you have to cut it here. One point to touch on there. So there's like some weird icons in here. You may want that to be accessible to your development team. You've also included them in your prototype on InVision. So as long as you simply, let's find another one. So all you have to do is mark it for export. And you can do the 2x versions or the Retina versions if you want to. Then when you come into your InVision project, it automatically slices out each of those assets individually.
So based on the sketch file settings, we'll figure that out.
And all you have to do is mark it as export. But that's just another example of the slicing is done within the design tool.
Right.
Yeah.
How often do you run into things like an edit in place piece of text that you can't represent well in that?
Say that again?
Like, let's say you had a saved search and you wanted to edit the title in place. You know what I mean? Like you click on it and you're able to edit it.
Right.
How often do you run into scenarios like that where you're not able to mock something like that up?
Yeah, that would be so you can replicate some of the functionality with like GIFs, like somebody was typing out in an input field or something like that. But for the most part, you have to make a decision on, is it worth a ton of hover states to replicate that functionality, or is it apparent to that end user what the functionality should be? But yeah, there are situations like that.
But
I don't think that they're very common, but you certainly run into them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I do get into situations where, especially if it's like dummy data, and I want to have that data the same across all the different screens, and I want to give the user the ability to click on a few options, it takes a lot of time just to make that all fake, right?
Mhm.
So it's the same decision has to be made. It's probably not worth it. They can get the gist with just the one dummy data example.
You're really getting the meat and potatoes and not,
Right,
not
right.
the sides. Yeah.
Right.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.